So we go through the bantamweight history. Again, yeah, I mean, we're starting here, but it does go back into the bare knuckle era. Again, Charlie Lynch, and Simon Knightley, people like that in the bare knuckle eras, sort of the 1850s. And again, you've got like Tom Spider Kelly coming later on. But I'm going to go through a little bit of history on that. So the bantam glove era began when Chappie Moran from Manchester beat Tommy Kelly in 1889. Then the weight limit in America at that time was brought to 110 pounds, but it crept up pound by pound from 112 to 114, then 115, 116, until finally settling in 1915 at the present 118 pounds, which the British introduced in 1910. The early history of the division is even more confused than most, with the championship almost continuously in dispute until the 1920s, sometimes with parallel versions on offer on either side of Atlantic. So since the record-breaking 8-year reign of Mexican-American Manuel Ortiz, who made 19 successful defences, and the bantamweight class has been dominated with the likes of Joe Pecora, Ruben Oliveras, Carlos Zarate, Lou Pinter, Alfonso Zamora, the great Adair Joffre. Again, I might even put him at the top, maybe Adair Joffre, some people would disagree. The bantams, the only man to beat him was fighting Harada. And then there's George Lejeune for Panama. They all made their mark. Champions Jeff Chandler and Richard Sandoval, and Orlando Gonzalez, I remember him from America, revived interest in the division, whose brother Gabby held the WBO title at the same time. Yeah, that's right, I remember that. Enjoying a remarkable run as IBF champion. So, I digress. So let's go straight in with the bantams. So, let's start here. So we start here on June the 5th, 1989. Chappie Moran wins on points over Tom Spider Kelly. Wins on points over 10 rounds. He was from the US in Brooklyn, New York. And then you've got January 31st, 1890, Tommy Kelly wins by KO against Chappie Moran in New York. And then you've got May the 9th, 1892, Billy Plymouth from England wins on points over Tommy Spider Kelly. Or he was called the Harlem Spider, that was his nickname, so I'm going to use it. And that was in Coney Island. Then you got December 28th, 1892, Billy Plymouth wins in the 8th round, referee starts the fight, against Joe McGrath from the US in Coney Island. In May 28th, 1895, Billy Plymouth wins by KO in the 7th round against George Caulfield from England in London, England. And then November the 25th, 1895, Pedler Palmer. Again, he lived down Brighton Way. Some stories there. Again, I'm not sure if he was born there, but I know he ended up living down that way. England. obviously. He wins by disqualification against Billy Plymmer in London. I remember he got done for an altercation on the train, I think. Something along them lines. Might have been manslaughter or something like that. But Pedler Palmer, cracking old fighter. Then October the 12th, 1896, Pedler Palmer wins on points over 20 rounds against Johnny Murphy from the US in London, England. Then January 25th, 1897, Pedler Palmer wins over 14 rounds, referee stops the fight, against Ernie Stanton from the US in London, England. Then December the 12th, 1898, Pedler Palmer wins in the 17th round, referee stops the fight against Billy Plymmer, that was London, England. Then April the 17th, 1899, Pedler Palmer wins in the third round, referee stops the fight against the match, referee stops the match against Billy Rochford from the US in London, England. And then September the 12th, 1899, Terrible Terry McGovern from the US wins by KO in the first round against Pedler Palmer in Tuckahoe, New York. Then September the 6th, 1900, Harry Forbes from the US draws with Caspar Leon from the US in St. Joseph's. And then that's for the vacant title. And then March 18th, 1901, Harry Harris from the US wins on points over 20 rounds against Pedler Palmer. That was in London, England. Harris claimed the vacant title but soon relinquished it to box at featherweight in April the 2nd, 1901. Harry Forbes wins on points over Caspar Leon in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's for the vacant title. And then we got November the 11th, 1901, Harry Forbes wins by KO in the second round against Dan Doherty from the US in St. Louis, Missouri. And January 23rd, 1902, Harry Forbes wins by KO in the fourth round against Dan Doherty in St. Louis, Missouri. Then February 27th, 1902, Harry Forbes wins on points against Tommy Feltz from the US in St. Louis, Missouri. Then May 1st, 1902, Harry Forbes draws over 20 rounds with Johnny Regan from the US in St. Louis, Missouri. December 23rd, 1902, Harry Forbes wins in the 7th round, referee stops the fight against Frankie Neal from the US in Oakland. Then February 27th, 1903, Harry Forbes wins on points over 10 rounds against Andy Tockel from England in Detroit, Michigan. Then February 27th, 1903, Harry Forbes wins on points over 10 rounds against Andy Tockel from England in Detroit, Michigan. Then February 27th, 1903, Harry Forbes wins on points over 10 rounds against Andy Tockel from England in Detroit, Michigan. Then August the 13th, 1903, Frankie Neal wins in the second round by KO against Harry Forbes in San Francisco. Then September 4th, 1903, Frankie Neal wins by KO in the 15th round against Billy D. Corsi. 15 round KO against De Corsi from the US in Los Angeles. October 16th, 1903, Frankie Neal draws over 20 rounds with Johnny Regan. Again, Johnny Regan gets a draw this time with Frankie Neal, as in Los Angeles. October 16th, 1903, Frankie Neal draws, we just done that one, October the 17th, 1904, Joe Bowker from England wins on points over 20 rounds against Frankie Neal. That was in London, England. And then you got May the 29th, 1905, Joe Bowker wins on points over 20 rounds against Pinky Evans from the US in London, England. Bowker relinquished the title, which was claimed for America by Jimmy Walsh, and for Britain by Digger Stanley. Yeah, I've got a book with Digger Stanley, and it's got the Digger Stanley guard. Yeah, an interesting guard he had. October the 20th, 1905, Jimmy Walsh wins on points over 15 rounds against Digger Stanley from England in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Walsh relinquished the title due to weight problems. There followed a most confused period with several claimants, including Johnny Coulan, Digger Stanley, Montiatel, Frankie Conley, and Jimmy Walsh on his comeback. So we got the IBU version, the British version. Again, a lot of people think the fragmented titles come along later on, but you did sort of have it in these days, but they did end up sort of unifying in the end most of the time. I digress. So January the 20th, 1906, Digger Stanley wins on points over 20 rounds against Ike Bradley from England in Newcastle, England. Then December the 13th, 1906, Digger Stanley wins on points over 20 rounds against Ike Bradley in Liverpool, England. And then May the 24th, 1909, Digger Stanley draws over 15 rounds with Jimmy Walsh in London, England. Then October the 17th, 1910, Digger Stanley wins by KO in the 8th round against Joe Bowker, London, England, that was in. Then December the 5th, 1910, Digger Stanley wins on points over 20 rounds against Johnny Condon from England in London, England. Then September the 14th, 1911, Digger Stanley wins on points over 20 rounds against Ike Bradley, as in Liverpool, England. Then April the 22nd, 1912, Digger Stanley wins on points over 20 rounds against Charles Ledoux from France in London, England. That was the IBU recognised this as a title match. June 23rd, 1912, Charles Ledoux from France wins by KO in the 7th round against Digger Stanley from England in Dieppe, France. So let's go up. Yes, so we're going to go for the 24th of June. 24th of June, 1913, Eddie Campy from the US wins on points over 20 rounds against Charles Ledoux from France in Vernon. And in October 10th, 1913, Eddie Campy draws over 15 rounds with Frankie Burns from the US in Denver, Colorado. January the 31st, 1914, Kid Williams from the US wins by KO in the 12th round against Eddie Campy. That's in Los Angeles, California. June the 9th, 1914, Kid Williams wins by KO against Johnny Cullen from Canada in Las Vegas. Then the American versions of the title, June the 26th, 1908, Jimmy Walsh wins by KO in the 11th round against Jimmy Carroll. That's in San Francisco. And then you got October the 9th, 1908. Jimmy Walsh wins on points over 15 rounds against Young Brett from the US in Baltimore. Then December the 21st, 1908, Jimmy Walsh draws with Mont Abel from the US in San Francisco. Then May the 24th, 1909, Jimmy Walsh draws with Digger Stanley after 15 rounds in London, England. Walsh moved back to featherweight again. Then June 19th, 1909, Monte Atal wins. Referee stops the fight in 18 rounds against Frankie Neal in San Francisco. December the 17th, 1909, Monte Atal draws over 20 rounds against Danny Webster from the US in San Francisco. Then February 22nd, 1910, Frankie Conley wins by retirement in the 42nd round against Monte Atal in Vernon. Then March the 6th, 1910, Johnny Cullen wins by KO in the 19th rounds against Jim Kendrick from England in New Orleans. February 26th, 1911, Johnny Cullen wins on points over 20 rounds against Frankie Conley in New Orleans. February the 3rd, 1912, Johnny Cullen wins on points over 20 rounds against Frankie Conley. And again, that was in Los Angeles. Then you got February the 18th, 1912, Johnny Cullen wins on points over 20 rounds against Frankie Burns in New Orleans. And then you've got June the 9th, 1914, Kid Williams wins by KO against Johnny Cullen in Los Angeles. That was for the undisputed title. So, for the undisputed title now, December the 6th, 1915, Kid Williams draws with Frankie Burns over 20 rounds in New Orleans. February the 7th, 1916, Kid Williams draws over 20 rounds with Pete Herman from the US in New Orleans. Then January the 9th, 1917, Pete Herman wins on points over 20 rounds against Kid Williams in New Orleans. Then November the 5th, 1917, Pete Herman wins on points over 20 rounds against Frankie Burns in New Orleans. Then December the 22nd, 1920, Joe Lynch of the US wins on points over 15 rounds against Pete Herman in New York. July 25th, 1921, Pete Herman wins on points over 15 rounds against Joe Lynch in New York. Then September 23rd, 1921, Johnny Buff wins on points over 15 rounds against Pete Herman in New York. Then November the 10th, 1921, Johnny Buff wins on points over 15 rounds against Jackie Sharkey from the US in New York. Not the same Jackie Sharky that fought a heavyweight, a different one. Again, round similar times though. Then July the 10th, 1922, Joe Lynch wins by retirement in the 14th round against Johnny Buff in New York. Then December the 22nd, 1922, Joe Lynch wins on points over 15 rounds against Midget Smith in New York. Then you got March 21st, 1924. Soon later, referee Abe Goldstein from the US wins on points over 15 rounds against Joe Lynch in New York. Then July the 17th, 1924, Abe Goldstein wins on points over 15 rounds against Charles Ledoux in New York. And then September the 9th, 1924, Abe Goldstein wins on points over 15 rounds against Tommy Ryan from the US in Long Island. And then December the 19th, 1924, Eddie Martin from the US wins on points over 15 rounds against Abe Goldstein. And then March the 20th, 1925, Charlie Rosenberg wins on points over 15 rounds against Eddie Martin in New York. And then July 23rd, 1925, Charlie Rosenberg wins by KO in the 4th round against Eddie Shee from the US in New York. Then Rosenberg was suspended indefinitely by the New York Commission because of suspicion that the fight was fixed. February 1927, Rosenberg's suspension was lifted to allow him to defend against Bushy Graham in New York on February the 4th, 1927, and then Rosenberg lost his title on the scales when he came in at 122.5. Although he won a 15-round decision, he was then suspended again for making a secret agreement with Graham concerning the percent split of the purse money. So we got February 24th, 1927, Bud Taylor, that's Charles Bud Taylor, good fighter, fought Mickey Walker, etc. But again, February 24th, 1927, Charles Bud Taylor wins on points over 10 rounds against Eddie Shee in Chicago, Illinois. Taylor won recognition in 4 states as champion. And then March 26th, 1927, Charles Bud Taylor draws over 10 rounds with Tony Canzoneri, a guy who would go up the weights. Canzoneri, again, he'd be in my top 20 pound for pound, definitely Canzoneri. That was in Chicago, Illinois. That was for the vacant NBA title. Then May the 5th, 1927, Teddy Baldock from England wins on points over 15 rounds against Charlie Bell in London, England. That's the British version of the vacant title. Then June the 24th, 1927, Charles Bud Taylor wins on points over 10 rounds against Tony Canzoneri in Chicago, Illinois for the vacant NBA title. October the 6th, 1927, Willie Smith from South Africa wins on points over 15 rounds against Teddy Baldock from London, England. The British version of the title Smith never defended it and moved up to featherweight. So we're going to finish Yeah, so we go from here. May the 21st, 1928, Bushy Graham. May 23rd, 1928, Bushy Graham wins on points against Corporal Izzy Schwartz from the US, 15 rounds points decision. That was in New York for the vacant New York title. Good fighter, Corporal Izzy Schwartz. August 1928, Charles Bud Taylor relinquished the NBA title to box at featherweight. Then January 1929, Graham gave up the New York State Athletic title because of weight problems. So June 18th, 1929, Al Brown from Panama wins on points over 15 rounds against Vidal Gregorio from Spain in New York for the vacant title. And then we've got February 8th, 1930, Al Brown wins by disqualification in the 4th round against Johnny Erickson from the US in New York. And then we got October the 4th, 1930, Al Brown wins on points over 15 rounds against Eugene Huet from France, and that was in Paris, France. Then we got May the 20th, 1931, Pete Sandstall from Norway wins on points over 10 rounds against Archie Bell in Montreal, Canada, recognised in Canada as being for the vacant title. So June the 17th, 1931, Pete Sandstall wins on points over 15 rounds against Art Giroux from Canada in Montreal, Canada. August the 25th, 1931, Al Brown wins on points over 15 rounds against Pete Sandstall. That was in Montreal, Canada for the undisputed title. Then October the 27th, 1931, Al Brown, and that's Panama Al Brown, I'm sure, wins on points over 15 rounds against Eugene Huet from France in Montreal, Canada. July the 10th, 1932, Al Brown wins on points over 15 rounds against Kid Francis from Italy in Marseille, France. Then September 19th, 1932, Al Brown wins by KO against Emile Pladner from France in Toronto, Canada. Then March 18th, 1933, Al Brown wins on points over 12 rounds against Dom Bernasconi from France in Milan. Then July 3rd, 1933, Al Brown wins on points over 15 rounds against Johnny King from England in Manchester, England. Then February 19th, 1934, Al Brown wins on points over 15 rounds against Young Perez from Tunisia, Paris, France. Yeah, I've got a DVD on him. It's called Escape from Auschwitz. He was, Young Perez was a prisoner of war, a Jewish guy, no, a Tunisian, and not sure if he was Jewish, but he was in a prisoner of war camp. And yeah, it was about his exploits. He got killed trying to escape, but again, he had boxing matches against the Nazis that were controlling him inside, and his brother told the tale. So I digress there. Young Perez there. May 1934, the NBA stripped Brown of his failure to defend against Baby Casanova. So I'm gonna take that page over. Gonna do just a little bit of this page. So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna start on the NBA title. So NBA title. Sixto Extebar, starting on a good fight there. Puerto Rico. Again, he wins by KO in the 9th round against Baby Casanova from Mexico. That's in Montreal, Canada. Then August the 8th, 1934, Sixto Extebar wins on points over 15 rounds against Eugene Huet from France in Montreal, Canada. Then the New York and IBU titles together. November the 1st, 1934, Al Brown wins by KO against Young Perez in Tunisia his home ground, in Tunis, Tunisia. Then June 1st, 1935, Balsar sung Chile from Spain, wins and points over 15 rounds against El Brown in Valencia, Spain. And then the New York Commission and NBA decided to recognise the winner between Lou Salica and Sixto Extebar as the champion. I hope Lou Salica's in the Hall of Fame now. He wasn't a while ago, but I hope he's got in there. I haven't checked. He deserves to. So, New York and NBA titles. August 26th, 1935. Lou Salica from the US wins and points over 15 rounds against Sixto Extebar in New York. And then November the 15th, 1935, Sixto Extebar wins on points over 15 rounds against Lou Salica in New York. Then the IBU title, June 29th, 1936. Tony Marino from the US wins by KO against Baltazar Sung Chile. That was in New York. And then August 31st, 1936, Sixto Extebar wins in the 13th round. Referee stops the fight against Tony Marino in New York for the undisputed title. And then we got the undisputed title, October the 13th, 1936. Sixto Extebar wins by KO in the first round against Carlos Quintana from Panama in New York. And February the 21st, 1937, Sixto Extebar wins on points against Lou Salica in New York. Then we've got September the 23rd, 1937, Harry Jeffra from the US wins on points over 15 rounds against Sixto Extebar in New York. Then February 20th, 1938, Sixto Extebar wins on points over 15 rounds against Harry Jeffra in San Juan. The IBF withdrew recognition of Sixto Extebar. So we're going to finish here somewhere. So the IBU title, March the 4th, 1938, El Brown wins on points against Baltazar Sung Chile in Paris, France for the vacant title. Then May 1938, the IBO, in its interests of unity, withdrew recognition from Brown. So we're going to quite a lot of separation actually about this point. So we got the undisputed title. April the 2nd, 1939, Sixto Extebar wins on points over 15 rounds against KO Morgan from the US in San Juan. And then October 1939, Sixto Extebar relinquishes the title because of his difficulty making weight. The NBA nominated Georgie Pace as the champion. The NBA title, March the 4th, 1940, Georgie Pace from the US draws with Lou Salica in Toronto, Canada. September the 24th, 1940, Lou Salica wins on points over 15 rounds against Georgie Pace from New York. December the 2nd, 1940, Lou Salica wins in the third round. Referee stops the fight against Small Montana from the Philippines in Toronto, Canada. January 13th, 1941, Lou Salica wins on points over 15 rounds against Tommy Fort from the US in Philadelphia. Then we got April 25th, 1941, Lou Salica wins on points over 15 rounds against Lou Transparenti from the US in Baltimore. So then we got undisputed title, June 16th, 1941, Lou Salica wins on points over 15 rounds against Tommy Fort, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Then we got August the 7th, 1942, Manuel Ortiz from Mexico wins on points over 12 rounds against Lou Salica in Hollywood. And the New York Commission refused to accept this as a title match because it had been contested over 12 rounds rather than their 15. And unlike today, it's 12. They continue to regard Salika as a champion. So we've got the NBA title, January the 1st, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins and points over 10 rounds against Kenny Lindsay from Canada in Portland. Then January 27th, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins in the 10th round by referee stopping the match against George Freitas from the US in Oakland. March the 10th, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins in the 11th round. Referee stops the match in Oakland. So might as well go towards the end of the page now. So April 28th, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO against Luke Cordoza from the US in Fort Worth, Texas. Then May 26th, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins and points over 15 rounds against Joe Robalto in Los Angeles. Then July the 12th, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO in his 7th round against Joe Robalto, Seattle, Washington. October the 1st, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO in the 4th round against Leonardo Lopez from the US, Los Angeles, California. Then November 23rd, 1943, Manuel Ortiz wins and points over 15 rounds against Benny Goldberg from the US in Los Angeles, California. And then March the 14th, 1944, Manuel Ortiz wins and points over 15 rounds against Ernesto Aguilar from Mexico, and that was in Los Angeles. Then April the 4th, 1944, Manuel Ortiz wins on points over 15 rounds against Tony Oliveira from the US. 15 rounds point decision for Ortiz in Los Angeles. Then we got September the 12th, 1944, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO against Luis Castillo from Mexico in Los Angeles. November the 14th, 1944, Manuel Ortiz wins in the 9th round. Referee stops the fight against Luis Castillo. So we're going to go to here, and I'm probably going to finish here now on this one. So I'll finish at the end of Manuel Ortiz's reign. So February 25th, 1946, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO in the 13th round against Luis Castillo in San Francisco. May 26th, 1946, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO against Kenny Lindsay from Canada in Los Angeles. And then we go June 10th, 1946, Manuel Ortiz wins by KO in the 11th round against Jackie Jurich from US in San Francisco. Then he gets beat here. I'm going to finish on this one. January 6th, 1947, Harold Dade from the US wins on points against Manuel Ortiz in San Francisco. Lovely. That's the end of the first of the bantamweight boxing title history. Bang.